Chapter 8 of The Magic Nuts by Mary Louisa Molesworth. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Anne Fletcher. Chapter 8 Treetop Land. Where were you taught your song, little bird? Who sent you to kiss us, you breezes of May? There are secrets, yes, secrets you never have heard, whispered breezes and bird as they fluttered away. Spring Song. Where were they? Why, sitting on the short, thymy grass just behind the castle, not a stone's throw from the old tree trunk where they had found the little door which the golden key had opened. They gazed at each other, and then rubbed their eyes and gazed again. "How did we get out of the panniers?" said Hildegard. "I never felt anything. Did you, Leonore?" Leonore's reply was another question. "Have we been dreaming?" she said. "Oh, no, of course, it couldn't be that. People can't dream the same dream together. Oh, it is too funny and queer." "It's just what it is," said Hildegard, laughing. "We've been to Gnomeland, and now we've come back again. And after all, Leonore, we haven't been 2 hours away. Look at the sun. It's not near setting yet. But of course in Gnomeland, as they told us, they don't count time as we do." She got up as she spoke and gave herself a little shake. "I want to be sure I have not been dreaming," she went on, "even though I know I haven't. Pinch me, Leonore, just a nice little gentle pinch to make me feel real, and I'll pinch you in return." The pinching made them both laugh, which took away the dreamy feeling better than anything else. "And now," said Hildegard, "I suppose we had best make our way home. To your home, I mean, Leonore, as fast as we can. Grandmamma gave me leave to stay out till sunset, and Aunt Anna will be expecting us back in time for coffee." "Yes," said Leonore, "she hoped you would come back with me after our walk. Oh, but Hildegard, what shall we say if they ask where we've been?" "Say?" repeated Hildegard. "Why, that we've been up in the woods behind the castle. We mayn't tell anything more, and I don't believe we could if we tried. That's always the way with people who've been to Fairyland, or at least part of the way there. Besides—" But she hesitated. "Besides what?" asked Leonore curiously. "Oh," said Hildegard, "I was only going to say that I'm not sure but what Aunt Anna understands a great deal more than she says. There's something very fairyish about her sometimes. I don't think she'll question us much." "Perhaps," said Leonore, in her funny, rather prim, matter-of-fact little way, "she's been there herself when she was a little girl." "I shouldn't much wonder," Hildegard replied, and then they turned to descend the hill towards the village street. "Hildegard," said Leonore, as they were walking on, "how shall we know when we are meant to crack the next 2 nuts?" "I can't tell you just now," her little friend replied, "for I don't know myself, but I'm quite sure we shall know in good time. My fairy won't forget about us, and she will tell us somehow." Fraulein Elsa was looking out for them at the gate. She welcomed them with a cheerful smile. "You are just in good time for coffee," she said. "Aunt Anna sent me out to look for you. Have you had a pleasant afternoon?" "Oh, very pleasant indeed," Hildegard replied. The governess asked no more, nor did Aunt Anna, who was seated at the table, where there was a tempting display of the cakes which she knew to be Hildegard's favourites. "I thought you would be punctual," she said to the children. "You have been up in the woods behind the castle, I suspect, and I hope you have brought back a good appetite." "Very good indeed," they replied together, and at the same moment a funny thought struck them both. The collation had not been of a kind to prevent their feeling hungry now, and Aunt Anna was quite satisfied with the way the cakes disappeared. "I think I must be going home," said Hildegard a little later on. "Grandmamma will like to find me there when she returns from her drive. May Leonore come to the foot of the castle hill with me?" "Oh, certainly," said Fraulein, "and tomorrow I hope you may meet again, indeed every day, unless the weather should be very bad." "Oh, in that case," said Hildegarde eagerly, "I hope Leonore will wrap herself up well and come to spend the day with me. Of course I could come here. I am not the least afraid of rain or wind or snow or anything like that. But the castle is so big and such a splendid place for playing in when there's any one to play with, though it is rather dull all alone. And about tomorrow," she went on, "may Leonore come up immediately after dinner? Grandmamma would like to see her." To this request, too, Fraulein willingly consented, and the two children set off. "You have your nuts quite safe," said Leonore, as they kissed each other in saying good-bye, and Hildegarde nodded reassuringly. "You needn't be afraid," she said. "After keeping them all these years, since I was a little baby, it isn't likely that I should lose them now, just when they've come to be of use. I should be more afraid of yours, Leonore, except that, to tell you the truth, I don't believe either of us could lose them if we tried." "Oh, mine are quite safe," said Leonore, slipping her hand into her jacket pocket to feel them, "and I certainly won't risk trying whether they would find their way back or not." And so saying, she ran off. Nothing came to interfere with their plans. The weather continued lovely, and the children spent every afternoon together. For the old Baroness, Hildegarde's grandmother, to whom Leonore was introduced the next day, was just as pleased on her side as were Fraulein and Aunt Anna on theirs, that each, otherwise a lonely little girl, should have a companion. And for 2 or 3 weeks nothing special happened. They searched in vain among the trees behind the castle for the old trunk in which was the little door. No trace of it was to be seen, but this scarcely disappointed them. "It wouldn't be a magic door," said Hildegarde, "if it was always there, or at least always to be found. No, Leonore, we must just wait till the spinning-wheel fairy sends us some message, or tells us somehow what we are to do." To which Leonore agreed. Nevertheless, on many an afternoon they lay down with their ears to the ground near the spot where they believed the entrance to Gnomeland to be, listening if no murmur of the queer underground life which they had had a glimpse of could reach them. But it never did. At last one day Hildegarde appeared with a look on her face which told Leonore that she had something to tell, and as soon as they were by themselves she began eagerly. "Leonore," she said, "I believe I've got a message at last from our fairy. I'm not sure if it was a dream or if she was really there. It was quite early this morning before I was up. I thought I saw her standing beside my bed, her real self, you know, not the little old market woman. She smiled and said, 'You have been very patient children, and now you shall be rewarded. Crack 2 more of your nuts this afternoon when you're up in the woods. Throw high and throw together, and you will see.' And then, when I was going to speak to her and thank her and ask her to explain a little more, she was gone." "Of course it was a message," said Leonore. "Let us hurry off as fast as we can," for it was already afternoon. "I should think the best place would be just where we cracked the first ones." "No," said Hildegarde, "I think as near as we can guess to the magic door would be the best. Further up in the woods, I mean, than where we cracked the nuts." So hither they hastened, full of eagerness and excitement. "You crack first this time," said Hildegarde, "as I did the last." Leonore obeyed her, and both little girls peered anxiously into the nutshell. Their first idea was that it would contain some paper of directions, as had been the case before, but it was not so. On the contrary, the only thing they saw was a little mass of very, very fine colourless thread or silk, so fine indeed as to seem almost like a cobweb. With the utmost care Leonore drew it out. It was stronger than it looked, for at one end was attached to it a small, delicately fashioned silver hook, like the finest fairy fish-hook. The children stared at each other. "What can it mean?" they said. Leonore gave the threads a little shake. One end dropped to the ground, and in doing so unravelled itself. "I see what it is," exclaimed Hildegard. "It is a rope ladder, a fairy's rope ladder, of course, for nothing stronger than a spider could possibly climb up it. Perhaps my nut will explain." And so saying, she hastened to crack it. But to their surprise and momentary disappointment, its contents were precisely the same as those of Leonore's nut. "Well," said Hildegard, after a moment or two's reflection, "we're evidently meant to find out for ourselves what to do with these queer things." "But the fairy did say something to you," Leonore reminded her. "Throw high? Wasn't that what she said?" "Yes," said Hildegard. "How stupid of me to have forgotten. We must be meant to throw these little hooks, which are at one end, up into the air, like the Indian jugglers I've heard about, and as they are fairy hooks, I suppose they will find something to catch on to." "Throw high and throw together," was what she said, so here goes. Hold your hook carefully, Leonore, as I do. I will count, and when we get to 3, we must throw. 1, 2, and at 3 both children flung up the tiny missiles into the air. Up, up they flew, or seemed to fly, as straight as a rocket, till nothing was to be seen but the quivering thread gleaming brightly in the sunshine, which at that moment broke through the branches. And then so quickly that they couldn't watch the change, the fairy ladders grew and swelled, till the threads of which they were made were as firm and strong as tightly twisted fine rope. They grew taut, too, the lower end disappearing into the ground, as if held there by invisible hands. Hildegard's eyes shone with delight. "'Tis plain what we're meant to do," she said. "We're to climb up." Leonore, on the contrary, looked a little frightened. "Up to where?" she said timidly. "Oh," said Hildegard, "that remains to be seen, of course. Oh, don't be silly, Leonore. I think it was far more frightening to go down underground than to climb up into the beautiful sky. Come along." And they set off on their strange journey. It was not difficult after all. The rope felt firm and substantial, even though soft to the touch, so that it in no way rasped their hands. And when they got a little higher, they began to see that the hooks had attached themselves to the very top of an immensely tall tree, which somehow gave Leonore more confidence. "I'm not in the least giddy, are you?" said Hildegard. "I'm beginning to feel like a bird." And Leonore agreed that she too felt perfectly at ease. "That's what comes of having to do with fairies," said Hildegard with satisfaction. "With a fairy like ours, at least. You see, she plans everything so nicely for us." A few moments more, and their heads were on a level with the topmost branches. Just as they were wondering what was coming next, they heard a voice a little above them. "Jump," it said. "First Hildegard, then Leonore. Don't be frightened. I will catch you." Up they sprang fearlessly, for something in the voice made fear impossible, though instinctively they closed their eyes, and when they opened them again, there stood the spinning-wheel fairy, smiling at them as they lay together on a couch of something soft and blue, soft yet firm. "Are we on the other side of the sky?" asked Hildegard. The fairy nodded. "You are in Treetop land," she said, "the country of the air fairies. When you have rested after your ascent, I will show you the way on, and before long you will meet some old friends. In the meantime I will draw up your ladders, for they may serve again, and we don't like wasting anything. I spun them for you myself long ago. I have a spinning wheel up here as well as down below." She moved away, seeming to melt into the lovely blue which was all around them. But in a moment or two she returned again, and held out a hand to each child, and springing to their feet, Hildegard and Leonore gladly took hold of her. Then just before them, to their surprise, if they had still been able to feel surprise, they saw a little silver gate, which opened of itself as they approached it, and passing through with the fairy, they found themselves at the edge of what they at first thought was a lovely lake of water sparkling blue in the sunshine, but there were no boats upon it. "How are we to cross it?" asked Hildegard. "Surely this is fairyland itself at last." But their guide shook her head. "No, not fairyland itself," she replied, "though on the way to it. Real fairyland is still far away. I can only do as I promised you, show you some of the countries that lie between your land and it. Boats are not needed here. What you see is not water but air, and with these you will easily make your way across the lake." So saying, she drew from under her mantle something white and fluffy, which proved to be 2 little pairs of wings, 1 pair for each child, which she slipped over their heads. They fitted as if they had always grown there, and light as they had felt themselves before, Hildegard and Leonore now seemed to themselves to be made of air itself. "Off with you," said the fairy, laughing, with a little toss of her hand towards the children, as if they had been 2 balls of thistledown. "When you have seen enough and want to go home, you will easily find me. You have only to listen for the whir of my spinning wheel." And she was no longer there. Flying or swimming, which was it? They could scarcely have told, for though their wings kept them up as lightly as any bird, their feet too seemed to move in time with their wings. "Isn't it lovely?" said Hildegard, and Leonore, who at first felt a little breathless, laughed back in agreement. But this journey through the blue soon came to an end. The wings seemed to be their guides, for they suddenly dropped on their shoulders, and the children found themselves standing in front of another silver gate, higher and more imposing than the former one. It glittered so that for a moment or 2 they were dazzled, but as their eyes grew accustomed to the brilliance, looking up they saw worked in among the silvery trellis some letters, which with a little difficulty they spelt out. "Singing school" were the words they read. "Singing school?" repeated Hildegard. "What can that mean?" "And the fairy said we should soon meet some old friends," added Leonore. "Oh, Hildegard," and she held up her hand, "I think I understand. Listen." They stood perfectly still, and gradually sweet sounds reached their ears, a soft warbling as of many little voices in harmony. Then came a moment's silence, followed by the notes of a single singer, and then warbling again, and again another voice alone, trilling high, high, till it seemed to melt away in the distance. "That was a lark," said Leonore, "the last one, and the one before a blackbird, I think." "Or a thrush," said Hildegard. "Yes, I rather think it was a thrush." But in the eagerness with which they had been listening, they had not noticed that the high gates had opened gently inwards, and in the centre between them stood 2 charming figures smiling at the children. "Come in," said one of them. "We've been expecting you for some time." "Are you the air fairies?" asked Hildegard. She spoke with more confidence than to the gnomes. There was something so sweet and gracious about these pretty creatures that no one could feel afraid of them. "Yes," was the reply, "and we are also the bird singing teachers. Here you will see many of your old friends, nightingales, larks, blackbirds and robins, all of them, even down to the poor little sparrows whom we teach to chirp and twitter." "How wonderful!" exclaimed the children. "Are they all the little young birds?" asked Leonore. "Oh, no, of course not," she added. "They can't be, for this is autumn." "We have classes all the year round," said one of the fairies, "except in the very middle of your summer, when we give them a holiday, that you may all enjoy the bird concerts to perfection." They had been walking slowly onwards till now, through a wide passage, the walls of which were like the whitest marble, though without its hard coldness. And now the fairy, opening a door, signed to them to pass in, and as they did so, the music they had heard grew clearer and louder, for they were in the central hall of the great bird singing school. There they were, rows and rows of them, each family by itself, the smaller birds higher up, the bigger ones nearer the ground, and at the end of each row, perched a little apart from the others, was the head bird of his tribe, these, as the fairies explained afterwards, being the monitors of each class. But the queerest thing was that every kind of bird was there, even such as we never think of as musical in any way, for down the central passage were strolling some magnificent peacocks, long red-legged storks, and in a large basin of water at the farther end, graceful swans, snowy ducks, and even homely grey-plumaged geese were contentedly enjoying themselves. Hildegard and Leonore gazed in surprise. "Peacocks!" they exclaimed. "Peacocks and ducks and geese! Why, none of them can sing!" The fairy smiled.
"Ah," she said, "the ears that hear have something to do with true music. Down below in your world it is not like here with us. Much that is true music sounds to you harsh and unlovely. Wait a little, and you shall hear for yourselves."
End of chapter 8.